January 1988, and the region along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border was in mourning. 3 countries, India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, lowered their national flags. A ceasefire was observed in the Soviet Union's war in Afghanistan as a mark of respect. Hundreds of thousands of people paid tribute to Bacha Khan, a legendary Pashtun leader who was an activist and a pacifist, who influenced a generation in the fight against colonialism.
My name is Munawar. I come from Mardan. That I'm one of those few people left who grew up under the shadow of Bacha Khan. My grandfather, that is my mother's father, was a very close associate of his. I had frequent interaction with Bacha Khan. A lot of it I don't remember because I was young and his politics and philosophy was very deep and it went over my head. But one of my first memories, for instance, is I must have been 7 or 8 years old when my father took me to one of his jalsas. It was an enormous collection of people with red flags waving everywhere. And there must have been, to my little mind, millions of people over there. That was the first memory I have of Bacha Khan, of this huge man who stood there and talked in Pashto, of course, to these thousands of people. He was a man who believed in the good of everybody. A photograph was taken by somebody at that time. It was his last living photograph.
Bacha Khan's real name was Abdul Ghaffar Khan, meaning King of Chiefs, reflecting his historic importance. He was born in 1890 in the northwest province of Punjab in what was then British India. Khan was born in a country under colonial rule, and he spent almost all his long life fighting what he saw as British oppression.
Before the arrival of the British, the people of the Indian subcontinent were acting differently. They were not homogeneous. India was divided into different states, into different provinces, ruled by different princes, different people, and different tribal chiefs. There was no regular central government. Means they were not under a strong central government. That's why they were being conquered or they were being occupied by the British easily, step by step, one after the other.
Later on, after the War of Independence, which we call mutiny in the British record, but we call that the War of Independence. Jang-e-Azadi in 1857, the Indian lost in that war. And what happened that in 1858, the entire India, that instead of ruling by the East India Company, that shifted to the British Parliament.
Britain's influence in India was vast. Queen Victoria had the title Empress of India and reigned over much of present-day India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Pakistan, and Afghanistan.
Afghanistan lost as a result of 2 Anglo-Afghan wars of the 19th century. Afghanistan lost 3 things. Number 1, sovereignty. Number 2, half of its population. Number 3, and the Pashtun land.
The northwest frontier province was separated from the Punjab. It was made a separate province. And actually the British divided the tribal area or separated the tribal area through a different line.
The people of this area are Pashtuns, a large ethnic group living in parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan. There are tens of millions of Pashtuns and they're mainly Muslim. Many are farmers and traditionally they have tribal structures, but there are several theories about their exact origins.
The history of Pashtun is actually controversy, means different historians have different interpretations or different histories of the Pashtuns. Means some of the historians portray the Pashtuns as the last tribe of the Jews. The second theory is the Pashtuns are the real Aryans. And the third theory is mixed race theory. Means the Pashtuns are the combination of the Greeks, the Turks, and the Persians, as well as the Jews, but they have been developed into a single nation, and that is what we call Pashtun or Pashtun or Afghan in a broader sense.
The area was dominated by Muslims. This was an overwhelmingly Muslim majority area. 93% of this area of the population was Muslim and only 7% were non-Muslim. Then the ethnic division of the province, 56% in the settled districts, they were Pashtuns. And then followed by Hindkowans, then even Gujars, then Kohistanis, and some other races.
Actually, the Pashtuns, since medieval times, they have been regulated their lives through their traditional customs, traditions, and their way of life. Pashtun Wali, that is what we call Pashtun Wali. It is actually an unwritten constitution of the Pashtuns through which they regulate their daily lives and through which they interact with other people.
So Pashtun Wali is really a code of life, and it has certain components. My own view is that Pashtun Wali is a code made by men. Of course, it is meant to apply to the whole of society. That the jirga, which is really the the forum of elders that decides disputes and sort of mediates, the jirga traditionally in our areas is all men.
Bacha Khan grew up in this male-dominated Pashtun Wali tradition. His parents were well off by the standards of the time and were able to provide their children with a broad education.
Bacha Khan was born into a family of landlord. His father Bahram Khan was a landlord and he had to his entitle some 8 villages, and he was a chief Khan of Uthmanzai. He had 4 daughters and 2 sons. So he sent his eldest son, Dr. Khan Sahib, he became a doctor later on, to study medicine in England. And he also sent Bacha Khan to school for education.
Bacha Khan got early education from madrasa. That was only memorizing the Holy Quran and reading the Holy Quran from his own village Uthmanzai. But afterward, his father admitted him in missionary school, which was a boarding school in Peshawar city, the legacy of the Edwards Mission School.
So even the idea was that he was supposed to go for his higher education to England, but then his mother was reluctant, and he said, I have already like losing one child going so far for education, and I don't want to lose you. So Bacha Khan then listened to his mother will, and he stayed there, he stayed back.
His father advised him to join army. For the recruitment in the British Army, they had a special regiment which was called the Guides. Bacha Khan narrates that an incident occurred and it changed my whole outlook. There was a Sikh officer, but the Sikhs, you see, they are used to of keeping long hair. And then a Tommy. Tommy were those officials who newly arrived in India from England. So he started beating the Sikh officer without any reason. And he abused him by telling him that you want to imitate us, the British. This was the turning point in his lifetime, and he came back. He informed his father that I will not join army because this is an insulting job.
Bacha Khan's short army career sowed the seeds of his anti-colonial activism. His British Army regiment, the Guides, was an elite group of Pashtun soldiers. However, the young activist viewed the white colonizers as arrogant, racist, and cruel, men whose oppressive laws prohibited any form of dissent.
It was actually a draconian law, and where a whole tribe would be responsible for a crime of a single individual.
There were some other legislations like Ghazi Act, wherein even gazing straight away in the eyes of a British soldier or a white man, you are liable for punishment. You have no right of appeal.
But the world was changing at the start of the 20th century. Global alliances were shifting in the years leading up to the First World War in 1914. The Ottoman Empire was in decline, and Bacha Khan was concerned that these changes might create a kind of moral vacuum in his region. So he decided to set up an Islamic school in his hometown of Utmanzai in 1910, in what was then called Northwest Frontier Province. Soon, other schools also sprang up. Pashtuns were becoming better educated and, as a result, far more resistant to colonial rule. This coincided with increasing British fears of Russian expansion from the north.
The Punjab government did not allow any reform package to be implemented in frontier area. Obviously, they were doing it for one purpose, because Russophobia.
The British wanted to keep the Pashtuns of the tribal areas isolated from the Pashtuns of the settled districts. So they have been actually the target or the victims of their own geostrategic location.
The Pashtuns were still in the very early stages of their resistance to British rule and had no clear strategy for opposing colonization. Bacha Khan joined forces with another Pashtun activist called Haji Sahib, who'd fought the British in the late 1890s and who'd supported Khan's school project. Bacha Khan could have followed Sahib's path of armed resistance, but then had second thoughts.
Bacha Khan joined him, but during that journey, Bacha Khan was not happy with the practices of running away and having a rifle with him, and he thought it's not an idea to fight or to work for his mission of education. So he stayed there at a mosque, they say it is said that for 40 days, and he just read the Holy Quran, and out of the Holy Quran he got this idea from those principles of non-violence that was preached long ago by the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when he came back, he also opened his change of schools.
The 4 years of the First World War gave Bacha Khan the time and opportunity to develop a strategy to oppose British rule. He also used the time to start a family.
Bacha Khan had 2 wives. His first wife was named Meher Kanda, and from that wife he had 3 children. The first child was Ghani Khan, and the second child was Wali Khan, and the third child was a female lady called Sardaro, who died at an infant age due to epidemic of influenza. Then he married he was married to his second wife, whose name was Nambata, and from Nambata he had 2 children, Ali Khan and Meher Taj.
It was unfortunate that the first wife died because she got ill, and of course, at that time, the health services and systems were not like what they are today. And the second one died on his journey to Hajj, which was a very long journey, and she fell down the steps and died. I think it was in Jerusalem.
Afterwards, he did not marry, and he contributed his whole entire life for the struggle and the uplift of our society and community.
The British government, meanwhile, introduced new legislation to combat what it saw as the rise of nationalist and anti-British activity in its Indian colonies. In March 1919, it passed the Rowlatt Act, which gave the police the power to arrest anyone for any reason, and introduced indefinite detention without trial. This triggered unrest a month later in the Punjab city of Amritsar.
1919, this is one of the very crucial years. India was going through very hard times. The Indians, they helped Raj during the war years, and they were expecting reward. They received something which they did not expect. This was the 2 Rowlatt Act bills. The Indians, they were shocked. Then the tragic incident of Jallianwala Bagh on 13th April in Amritsar, wherein the imperialist forces, they fired upon the locals who gathered in Jallianwala Bagh, Amritsar. More than 400 people were killed. The whole India was now upset over these 2 incidents. So the hartals, protest meetings, they were arranged in the whole of India in the major centers. In Charsadda, however, a huge crowd assembled, and the person who was supposed to address, he disappeared because of the fear of English. And then Abdul Ghaffar Khan, he was invited to make a speech. And this was his first speech to such a huge gathering. The gathering was more than 50,000 people.
Bacha Khan's profile grew. By the early 1920s, he was running a network of Islamic schools, while at the same time organizing Pashtuns to peacefully oppose British colonialism.
Just like a competent doctor, he just recommended. He just recommended that there is a disease, and that disease is ignorance and illiteracy. Later on, in 1921, he formed, along with his friends, Anjuman-e-Islaya Farena, the Association for the Reformation of the Afghans.
And the second thing was the Azad schools, Azad Madaras, to be run by the Anjuman members. The love of education, creation of love of education. This was the main objective of the Anjuman members. Then promotion of Pashto language and literature, getting rid of the slavery, and obviously doing away with the feuds among the Pashtuns.
The Afghan Reform Society, the Anjuman-e-Islah-e Afghani, grew in size and influence. In 1927, Bacha Khan formed another group, the Pashtun Jirga, or Pashtun Assembly, a youth reform group. Then 2 years later, he founded the eclectic Servants of God.
The problem was that they had made it clear that this organization is for youth and the educated youth. So now what to do with many other volunteers who were uneducated and who have crossed, say, 50 or 60. So to accommodate all these, in November 1929, another organization was formed. And this was given the name of Khudai Khidmatgar Organization, Khudai Khidmatgar Tahrik, or the Servants of God.
Its main characteristic was that it was not communal. It was not only for the Pashtuns. It was not only for Muslims. It was for all the communities living in the Northwest Frontier Province.
Molding public opinion in favor of non-violence in a society which was violence-ridden society, and always talks of martial race, then swordsmanship. These were very much talk of the day in this area. And then telling people, convincing them to renounce violence, to keep or go away with gun.
Khan's strategy of nonviolence was also advocated by Mahatma Gandhi, the leader of peaceful resistance to British rule in the rest of India.
That's why Mr. Gandhi would say that I didn't do a great task by converting Hindus to nonviolence because they already believed in nonviolence. But he said, you by converting Pashtuns to nonviolence is a great feat.
By 1929, Bacha Khan had founded 3 groups which all opposed British colonial rule in different ways. As these groups grew and became more vocal, the colonial rulers in the Pashtun areas of northwest British India became increasingly concerned at the spread of Bacha Khan's influence. A backlash against him seemed almost inevitable. Abdul Ghaffar Khan was a Pashtun leader in the northwest of British colonial India. He's better known as Bacha Khan, which translates from Pashto as King of Chiefs. He led a peaceful resistance movement in the early 20th century, when people across India challenged British colonial rule to gain independence. Bacha Khan fought for change not through violence but by championing education and by refusing to accept British colonial laws. He founded a peaceful protest movement, the Servants of God, which put him on a direct collision course with the British. Bacha Khan knew Mahatma Gandhi, who also advocated non-violent protest. Both leaders were imprisoned by the British.
Bacha Khan always convinced people that if you want to educate your future, just give a book, just give a kalam to their hand, not weapon. And he always says that if someone targeted, you don't target with weapon, just target with books and just target with your knowledge and education.
Bacha Khan's vision for reforming the education system was to give an alternate educational system to Pashtuns, to Muslims of this part of the world against the British colonial system education. There were 2 kind of institutions. The public sector schools were producing servants to the Britishers. And against them, Bacha Khan, Sanatam Dharam and Khalisa schools wanted to produce sons of the soil, which can serve their own soil and not the Britishers.
And according to the census reports available, 1911 census report, 1921, etc., out of 1,000, only 25 were literate. And when you come to the women, it was 10 reported literate out of 1,000.
All the schools, the Azad High School established by Bacha Khan and his companions were present in the whole then NWFP, which was comprised of the 5 districts, settled districts. The number of schools were 134 at that time, and there were 9,000 students studying in those schools at that time. In the system of the government, there were only 4,500 students. And that is why it increased the literacy ratio. So in 1931, the literacy ratio increased by 0.9, which was phenomenal at that time.
Education was just one platform of the Servants of God movement led by Bacha Khan. Its numbers swelled to over 100,000 Pashtuns, all pledged to use civil disobedience to challenge British rule. Khan traveled across the Northwest region through towns and villages to spread the message of peaceful resistance.
This was mainly by foot. Of course, at that time, in the 20s, 30s, transport wasn't like it was today. He did, of course, when he did long travels, like to meetings and things, he would go by train to different cities in what is now Pakistan and also to India. But him and his companions did a lot of traveling by foot. They stayed in very sort of, minimalist places. They kept to having simple food and not being a burden to the places that they visited. And that is what was powerful about him, his direct contact with his people.
During his mission, going from village to village, he will choose the home of the person who was the most poor amongst them. And he would choose his house, and they used to be very excited and happy about it, that Bacha Khan is going to be my guest and staying at my home. So everyone, all his followers, everyone who used to come to listen to them would come to that same fellow house and sit there with him, share all what he has to share with him. So even this was a sort of social recognition for the poor people, poor community, that he would inculcate values of humanity into them.
He used to go to Sindh, he used to Balochistan. And once he traveled to Karachi, to GM Said's place in a 3rd class. That was their principle. They used to travel in a 3rd class, which had wooden benches.
In Pashtun society, what we call hospitality or milmastia. Now, of course, hospitality is a good thing, but he feels that whenever guests come, there is extra economic pressure on the household. He himself, when he traveled with his companions for his spreading his political message, he used to not encourage that people slaughter chickens and cook food and do all this. He wanted it to be very simple, and he felt the burden fell on women, who, he said, never ate with the family, and they ate what was left over. And he said that I was the first one who said to my wife that you come and sit and eat with us, and she was very, very uncomfortable with this because she was not used to this.
Many of the people Khan met on his travels joined Khuda-e Khidmatgar, the servants of God. Members swore an oath to both uphold the group's principles of nonviolence and to stand with the oppressed against the colonial oppressor. They wore uniforms suggesting a form of military discipline, but with a key difference. Khuda-e Khidmatgar did not carry guns.
Bacha Khan was of the view that I could not unite and I could not organize the people without having a certain kind of discipline. So that's why his Khuda-e Khidmatgar were given certain ranks on the pattern of military. So it was a kind of an organized army, but unarmed.
Some discipline was required, and this discipline was daily parade of the regular members of Khuda-e Khidmatgar. And then some ranks were also distributed. For example, Journal, they were known as Jarnail, then Colonel and Captain. This is interesting in Uthman Zai. The Jarnail was a barber. In the morning, he will lead the parade and he will command the parade of all leading Khans, including Wali Khan, son of Bacha Khan himself. They will follow him.
So all the higher ranks were given to those who were looked down upon in the society. All the sons of the landlords, and the landlords used to acknowledge and salute the lower caste people.
23rd April 1930. This is a memorable day in the history of Pashtun. Unfortunately, not much coverage has been given to this event. The British, they fired upon innocent people. They were carrying no arms in Kissa Khani Bazaar. This massacre took place and more than 250 people, they were killed in cold blood. 11 in the morning, they started direct firing and it went till 3 o'clock.
There was another meeting near Mardan, a place named Thakar. Again, there was a peaceful demonstration. They opened fire on that demonstration, and again, many people were killed. In the same way, in the south, Banu district, in 1930, there was another demonstration of peaceful Khuda-e Khidmatgars. They were again fired upon by British security forces, and a large number of people were killed and imprisoned.
Then the repression, it went on. There was no one to hold them from doing atrocities. During the whole time, the Pashtuns, they never retaliated. There is not even a single incident to show that they killed some British officials in retaliation. They accepted non-violence as a creed and they follow it perfectly.
By the early 1930s, the independence movement began to gather momentum across the Indian subcontinent. Khan clashed with the British colonial authorities and was arrested in April 1930 on his way to address followers at a rally in Peshawar. He was handed a 3-year jail sentence. That same month, Mahatma Gandhi of the Indian National Congress escalated his anti-British protests. Khan's servants of God, who numbered over 100,000 members, shared many values with India's Congress Party. Their members largely followed different religions, but they both supported full independence from Britain. They also both refused to pay taxes to the British Crown.
All India National Congress was formed by a Britisher, A.O. Hugh, just for presenting the demands of the Indians to the British government through peaceful means. But it was later on that it became anti-British.
There he came in connection with Mahatma Gandhi, who also believed in non-violence. So there their connection got developed and made. The bonding was there, and the bonding was of non-violence. That already Bacha Khan, before meeting Mahatma Gandhi, had started to practice non-violence.
Some historians today compare Bacha Khan with Mahatma Gandhi, famous around the world for his role in Indian independence. The two men knew each other and sometimes campaigned together, and they both urged their people to rid the subcontinent of British rule. But while they both believed in non-violent resistance, Gandhi represented many more people, and so has far greater global recognition.
If we compare Bacha Khan with the Gandhiji, just you remember that Gandhiji, when he came, he was around about 40 years. When he came to India from South Africa, the All Indian National Congress was there. There was a stage, there was a party, but he joined and he infused a new spirit. This is number one. So far as Muhammad Ali Jinnah, which is known as Quaid-e-Azam, the great leader in Pakistan. Muslim League was there because Muslim League was formed in 1906. So in his case, the stage was there, the party was there, but he infused a legal you can say, legal methods and this method or that method. But in the case of Bacha Khan, he made his stage with his compatriots. He formed a group, a party. And another thing, which is in my opinion as a different, mostly political movements, whether reformative, whether political, or other groups or parties, etc., they always formed in the urban areas. But in the case of Khuday Khidmatgar movement, this started from a small village.
The Second World War was a key period for the future of the subcontinent. British India supplied 2.5 million soldiers who fought under British command against Nazi Germany and Japan. Gandhi's and Bacha Khan's demands for an independent India grew louder. As pacifists, they refused to support the war as it went against their non-violent principles. The Indian National Congress Party backed Britain's war effort. Khan resigned in protest, and Gandhi later spoke out against the war and was jailed by the British. When the war ended in 1945, the question was whether India would remain a single country or be partitioned into two separate states. This inflamed existing divisions between Hindus and Muslims. Over 1 million were killed and millions more migrated from one part of India to another. The Indian National Congress accepted partition, but with East and West Pakistan on India's opposite borders. Khan told Congress, quote, "You have thrown us to the wolves."
The Indian National Congress and the Khuday Khidmatgar led a movement against British colonialism. Bacha Khan's party did not talk about a separate country for Muslims, which was Pakistan. That was not talked about in detail actually till 1946. And in 1947, Pakistan came into being. So this was a political issue.
Abdul Ghaffar Khan was the most misunderstood person. Yes, the Khuday Khidmatgars and Abdul Ghaffar Khan, they opposed the creation of Pakistan, but they did it following certain principles. Abdul Ghaffar Khan was not shy of accepting this, that they opposed Pakistan. In March, 5th March 1948, he took the oath of allegiance to this country, to Pakistan. He made it clear in the Constituent Assembly that till yesterday, we opposed Pakistan on certain reason, on certain principle. But today onward, I'll be a faithful and loyal citizen of this country.
Bacha Khan failed to prevent partition and pragmatically accepted the reality by pledging his loyalty to the new state of Pakistan. But this loyalty came with conditions. In the years that followed, Khan called for an autonomous Pashtunistan. Not for the first time in his political career, he clashed with those in power.
After independence, his Khudai Khidmatgars were banned by the government. From 1948 to 1953, he remained in prison, and his family, his children, his sons were also taken to prison. Thousands of Khudai Khidmatgars were taken to prison for 5 years, and their properties were confiscated. Although he was member of the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan, and he took oath of allegiance to the new country, but he was imprisoned, so his followers came out in protest. So in Babara Charsada, the place where he belonged to, they demonstrated, and again fire was opened at them, and more than 600 people were killed, unarmed people.
This Sardarya Markaz or headquarter that was razed to the ground, that there are idols, and these are pro-Hindus and pro-Bharat. Bacha Khan is a traitor. This was in our books, in the textbooks, that he was a traitor.
The behavior of the newly established country was much harsher than the Britisher. He remained in British prison for 15 years. He remained in Pakistan prison for 18 years.
He was such a great man, but unfortunately people didn't recognize him. That is very sad. I'm sorry. He spent whole life in jail to aware people, to educate people, but unfortunately, the stakeholders, they didn't consider him as a hero. And he was a hero. He was a real hero. He was hero for us, and he will be forever in our heart.
In 1986 to 1987, about 2.5 years, he stayed with us. Then at that time he was 98 years old. He was confined to a wheelchair, but we stayed in the same room because he was invalid and he needed help. All our house, including my mother, though she was not well at that time, all of us were available for him to help and assist him. Yes, he wasn't a hassle for us.
When he died in 1988, 3 states lowered their flags for a person who had not remained in power even for 5 minutes. 3 states, India, Pakistan and Afghanistan, lowered their national flags.
Tens of thousands of mourners attended Bacha Khan's funeral, including high-level dignitaries from Afghanistan, India, and Pakistan. The cortege moved from Peshawar through the Khyber Pass to Jalalabad. At the time, Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan were battling occupying troops from the Soviet Union. Both sides declared a ceasefire to allow for the burial of Bacha Khan.
Bacha Khan was a non-violent icon of international caliber. But unfortunately, he is not mentioned very widely alongside Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Martin Luther King. But even then, he is too big to be suppressed. Our new generations are rediscovering him. Now we have a university in his name. Peshawar Airport is named after him. After a long time after his death, he was not mentioned in official history books. But you see, people have discovered him because his services were too big to be ignored.
Bacha Khan achieved a great deal in his extraordinarily long life, despite spending almost half of it in prison. He played a vital role advocating non-violent struggle in colonial India, and as a result, must have saved countless lives. Now, over 30 years after his death, Bacha Khan is achieving international recognition as an educator, a campaigner, and an active opponent of colonial rule.